If you've been in this handheld emulator space for any amount of time, there's a huge chance you've heard of the Miyoo Mini, which was and still is a lot of people's favorite portable emulator of all time because of just how small and portable it is. It wasn't the first Game Boy S device to ever release, but it certainly was the most impactful, seeing as every company that makes portable emulators is now trying to make one to cash in on their success, for better or for worse. It started with the Emulation RG35XX, which was their answer to the Miyoo Mini. It was notably bigger than the Mini, but wasn't all that different aside from the stock OS being arguably worse at launch. This, funnily enough, started a whole chain of 35XX devices that Emulation would release one like every weekend, while Miyoo sort of kept a low profile after the launch of the Mini. I didn't get the original Miyoo Mini. I'm not sure why, it probably would have made a great video, but I probably just didn't want to spend the money. But I did get the original 35XX, which I did own and use a lot, and I don't have it on me. I think I left it in my childhood bedroom, so you're just gonna have to take my word for it. Or check my old videos, because I literally reviewed the device. Miyoo didn't do too much after the Mini, at least for a while. They did incremental updates of the original Mini that replaced the older versions, but that was the only device they had. Meanwhile, Emulation released a million devices every single week in their 35XX line that has now since graduated to a 40XX or 34XX, depending on the screen size, including the RG35XXH, which came out not long after the original 35XX, which I did own and do still own, but I don't have with me, and I think I forgot it at home as well, so you're just gonna have to take my word for it. It wasn't until a little over a year after the launch of the original Mini that Miyoo decided to update their lineup a little bit by creating a Plus version of the Miyoo Mini, called the Miyoo Mini Plus. Very creative name, I know. This effectively just made it the same size as the original 35XX, and made it a little bit more powerful. It wasn't much, but it was something. And can you guess what Emulation did? A little under a year later, Emulation released the RG35XX Plus, which wasn't any bigger than the original, but it came with N64 games and DS games pre-installed, meaning it was much more powerful than the original. These two devices had their differences, but I honestly didn't care much for the battle. I was more familiar with Emulation's devices, so I picked up the 35XX Plus and have had it since. I didn't get the Miyoo Mini Plus until recently when 2retro.com reached out and gave me one for review. Thank you for that. We'll touch on that a little bit later. And I was content with having my 35XX Plus be my Game Boy S device of choice. I didn't really see any need to get any others because it did everything I needed it to. So at this point you might be wondering what pushed me to make this video, considering I literally just said that I didn't care for the battle between all of them, and it's kind of perfect the way it played out. It was a few days away from Thanksgiving break, which shows you just how long I've had this video on the back burner, and I was watching a Wolf Den video on the Trimui brick, and I don't know if it's because I'm just gullible to buying things or what, but I went on AliExpress and bought it. Not even thinking I was going to make a video on it, I just kind of wanted it. It arrived, I filmed some unboxing video in my dorm, and I just kind of had it. I wasn't thinking of making a video on it, I was probably going to anyway, but I wasn't going to make an unboxing video, that's for sure. And then I'm not joking, like 3 days later, 2retro.com reached out and offered me either the Trimui brick or the Miyoo Mini Plus for review. And I was like, I literally just bought the Trimui brick. Why don't I get the Miyoo Mini Plus and I can make a video comparing the three? And that's where we are. Touching on that 2retro thing from earlier, yes, they did send me the Miyoo Mini Plus for review, like I just said, but they have no say in what I say in this video or how I speak about them in this video. But I do think they're a great website to buy things from. So if you want to go get something for yourself, you can get something from their website for 10% off with my code GeorgeMcFarlane10, and I'd be getting a kickback from that. So you'd be saving money and supporting the channel. It's a win-win. Anyways, back to the video. So I'm going to be tackling this video in 5 different categories: design, controls, operating system, emulation capabilities, and price. I was going to make a section based on custom firmware, but I don't have enough SD cards for that, and there are plenty of other videos on the subject you can find, so I'm sorry you're not getting that from me, but if you really are interested after watching this video, if you find a device out of these 3 that you really like and you want to look at the custom firmware options, there are plenty of videos online. You're just not going to get that from me. All right, let's get started. Starting with the designs of these devices, all of them being Game Boy clones, they're not all that different from each other. They're all vertical devices with a D-pad, face buttons, and 4 triggers on the back, but they're all different enough that they can succeed at certain things that the others can't. The Miyoo Mini Plus feels the widest out of all of them in the hands because it has no chin at the bottom to even everything out. It's wider than the Trimui brick, but not the RG35XX Plus, which surprised me a little when I compared the two because I was expecting the Miyoo Mini Plus to be wider because it feels so much wider. It just comes back to what I said earlier. The 35XX Plus and Trimui brick both have bottom halves that are the exact same size as the top half, evening everything out and making them feel taller rather than wider. The Miyoo Mini Plus doesn't have that. That's not to say the design is bad. I actually think it's a step up because it makes the whole thing feel a lot more pocketable and portable while also feeling bigger. It was just surprising. Okay, cutting in here before we get on with the rest of the section, I have to mention this somewhere and I thought I'd do it here. While I was writing the script, the Miyoo Mini Plus fell on the floor off of my desk, which happened because everything around me just ends up falling on the floor. I'm a very clumsy person and somehow everything just ends up falling on the floor or getting lost. But it fell on the floor. This was the first time it ever fell on the floor. And the screen popped out. No, I'm not kidding. I don't think these are built amazingly, but come on, man. It fell on the floor once and the whole screen popped out. I put it back in and it works fine, but come on, that's kind of crazy. I know it is my fault, but like, seriously, that's kind of crazy. I don't think it'll happen to you, but like, I just wanted to mention it here because it did happen and I was scared the device was broken for a second. Anyways, the 35XX Plus probably has my least favorite design out of all of them just because of how clunky it feels in comparison to the other two. It's not horrible, but the shell feels the cheapest and the other two feel like they take advantage of their size better than it. The brick is smaller than the other two with a 3.2 inch display compared to the 3.5 inches of the other two. I honestly did not notice the screen difference until I put the devices next to each other and I was researching for this video because it's so minuscule that I didn't even notice that it was much smaller. I thought the whole device was just smaller. The Mini Plus has the same size screen as the RG35XX, which isn't surprising, but the smaller chin and overall better design just puts it over for me. Before I say the winner of this section, which is definitely obvious by now, let me just say that the Trimui brick has LED lights on the top, in the front, and under the triggers, which I think is really cool. They change color depending on what system you're hovering over, and I just really like them. They're not enough to give this category to the brick, but I think it's really cool that they're there. And I wanted to mention it because it is part of the design. For design, comes as a surprise to no one if you've been watching up until this point, but I'm gonna give it to the Miyoo Mini Plus. It's better than the 35XX for the reasons I literally just laid out, but it's also better than the brick because of its shorter chin, which makes it feel wider than it is, and bigger than it is, which makes it feel more comfortable to use, while being very small and portable. The brick's design is great, but the huge chin just feels like unnecessary empty space, and the Mini Plus gets rid of that while still being perfectly usable for someone with big hands like me. So this category goes to the Mini Plus. Let's move on. Moving on to controls, you'd probably think that there wouldn't be much of a difference because of how few controls there even are on all of these devices, but you'd be wrong. As I mentioned previously, all three devices have a D-pad, 4 face buttons, start and select buttons, a menu button, power button, volume buttons, and 4 triggers in the back. The Trimui brick is the only device with extra function buttons on the front, so if that matters to you. I hate to do it again, but my least favorite of the three has to go to the Emulation RG35XX Plus just because of how stiff the controls are and how uncomfortable it feels at times. The position of the controls here relative to the screen is great, but it's great on all of them, and the face buttons feel super shallow while also being rounded. It just feels inferior to the other two. Speaking of the other two, the Miyoo Mini Plus feels really good for how much shorter it is. The controls aren't my favorite of the three, but that doesn't mean they're bad. I think they're really good. It's kind of hard to describe because I think they're really similar to the 35XX's controls, but they don't feel as stiff, and I haven't dealt with any misinputs like people have on the 35XX Plus, so has a leg up over that. The controls just feel better on it than they do on the 35XX Plus, so that's why it beats it. But if the Miyoo Mini Plus isn't my favorite of the three, then that must mean the Trimui brick is, and it is. I was kind of surprised that it was my favorite of the three because I didn't remember liking the controls on the Trimui Smart Pro all that much, but I took the Trimui Smart Pro out of the desk drawer it's been in for the last 8 months and checked the controls and realized that the only great controls on there were the D-pad and face buttons, and that's all this device has in common with it. So they did good with that one. They're pretty much the same if just slightly refined, seeing as the face buttons feel slightly taller on the brick than they do on the Smart Pro, which adds up it makes a difference, makes this device feel a lot better. Something else on the brick that feels really good is the triggers. Now, the triggers I have on my device right now are not going to be the triggers that come with your device, at least pre-installed, because in the box, there are 3 different kinds of triggers that come up, which I think is great. I've switched them twice now because of how customizable they've made it. I think the default triggers are fine, but I really like these ones. They've made it really customizable, and I really like that because the more options, the better, especially on a device that's mimicking a device with such a limited control method as the Game Boy. Overall, I just think the brick is the best feeling device out of the 3. It might have had a leg up because it did come out much later than the other 2, and they might have had time to refine their controls from their last device, but their last device, the Smart Pro, also had a really good feeling D-pad and face buttons. So it's not like this is anything new for them. So this category goes to the Trimui brick. Let's move on. The base operating system on a device is really important because it's how you play your games. It should be pretty self-explanatory. There have been instances in the past where base operating system on devices have sucked, and others just haven't been my favorite. The most confusing operating system of the 3, and subsequently my least favorite of the 3, has to go to the Trimui brick. For all of the things the brick gets right, this is not one of them. It's not horrible, but when I first turned it on, I was very confused because it brought me to this page with just Bomberman games, and I wasn't sure how to get to the ROMs. It wasn't until I started going in all directions with the D-pad that I realized I had to go up and go to games to get to the other games they had in here. Aside from that, I just don't think it looks very nice. It operates fine. Some of the filters that I like on the 35XX Plus and Mini Plus aren't on here, which isn't that big of a deal, but the actual look of it isn't my favorite. The blue boxes around each game or emulator, with the background being some image that changes with each system, should look nice, but for some reason on here, it just doesn't. Also, I'm not sure how this plays into all of this, but the brick has retail indie games in their ports section. Emulation had this issue for a little while on their devices, and people rightfully called them out on it, and it seems they've listened because they've removed any retail indie games from their ports section. Trimui has not. Stardew Valley, Celeste, and several other games are on here, and I can pretty much guarantee the developers did not okay this. This isn't really related to the OS, but I wanted to put it in here instead of the emulation section, so this is where I'm putting it. If that matters to you, that's what you get. So yeah, that's my least favorite stock operating system, but what's my favorite? I'm honestly not too sure. The brick is unique, but it's unique in a bad way, and the other 2 aren't that different from each other. If we're basing it on how they launched, the Miyoo Mini Plus would probably win because it had the best operating system at launch, whereas the RG35XX Plus took a few updates to where I think it's a really good operating system just how it is. They're now on par with each other because of the updates Emulation has released, and I think if we're judging them now, they're just equal. But if we're judging them based on launch, it would go to the Miyoo Mini Plus. But we're judging it based on now. They're basic and don't do much when it comes to customization, but that's not really something you look for in a device like this. For me, I'm looking for something that can get me into a game quickly, and these systems do that really well. So this section ends in a tie. Both the Emulation RG35XX and Miyoo Mini Plus have simple operating systems that I think are really good for what they are. They let me turn them on and find the game I want to play almost immediately. They're simple and clean. And that's all I can really ask for. These are Linux handhelds after all. It feels kind of pointless to talk about the emulation capabilities of these things, knowing that most people who buy these are just going to be playing 8, 16, 32-bit systems. But I know there are some of you out there that want something that can play N64 and DS games alongside those, so we're talking about it regardless. So just for what systems these devices can play, the Miyoo Mini Plus loses. It's not as powerful as the other 2 and subsequently can't play as many systems. In this context, many means 2. This section is purely based on power, seeing as you need more power to be able to play higher end games. The lesser power in the Miyoo Mini Plus means it can't play N64 or PSP like the other 2 devices can. And by default, it can't play DS games. It can play it with Onion OS, but not with the stock OS. So I guess technically many means 3 in this case, but because it's unlockable, I'm counting it as playable. So many means 2. Fight me. Like I literally just said a second ago, the RG35XX and the Trimui brick can play everything the Miyoo Mini Plus can stock with the added benefit of N64, PSP, and DS games, so they're kind of evenly matched in that sense. Playing N64 games on these devices shows a clear difference, and that probably can just be attributed to the Trimui brick being a newer device. The RG35XX Plus has the usual graphical glitches you'd usually see on a low-end device like this, while the Brick it doesn't. The Brick plays N64 games perfectly fine for a device with just a D-pad and face buttons. Obviously, the controls aren't ideal, but comparing it to another device like the RG35XX Plus that also just has a D-pad and face buttons, it edges it out because it doesn't have those same graphical glitches that a lot of people probably can't look past. I mean, I can, but I don't know if you can. Both of these devices play PSP pretty well. The only difference between the two is that the Trimui Brick will force the games to be in their correct aspect ratio, whereas the RG35XX Plus will have them stretched to fit the entire screen. The Trimui Brick will have letterboxing, there will be black bars on the top and bottom, but if you don't want the games to be stretched, you won't have to configure anything on the Trimui Brick. DS games work really well on all of these devices. The only main issue though is that the Trimui Brick, at least by default, and the Miyoo Mini Plus don't have a way to enable the virtual stylus like the RG35XX Plus does. I'm not sure if there is a way for the Miyoo Mini. Onion OS doesn't have anything, and by default there's nothing you can do to enable it, but you can enable it on the Trimui Brick. This is something I was only able to figure out by watching a YouTube video about DS games on this thing, but this video by Retro Handheld Guides has a quick tutorial on how to get virtual styluses working on the Brick. You have to go into the FN key settings and set it to D-pad and joystick toggle. Then when you get into a game, press that toggle and a virtual stylus should pop up. It's not as nice on the one on the 35XX Plus though, because the D-pad isn't disabled while you're using it. So if you do use a stylus, your D-pad inputs are still going to be recognized, but it's good as there regardless. The 35XX wins for DS emulation because it's the easiest to get working right out of the box. You turn it on, you play a game, it has the hotkeys enabled so you can switch between the screens, and just pressing the power button once will enable the stylus and disable the D-pad. So if you're playing something like Professor Layton or a game that makes you draw a lot, using the touchscreen, you can do that without having to worry about the D-pad inputs actually being recognized. They're all great for what you're probably going to do with each of them. It's just that the RG35XX and Trimui Brick have the added benefit of N64, DS, and PSP right out of the box. And yeah, like I said earlier, the Miyoo Mini Plus just can't play all of the games that the others can because it's not as powerful, and it loses this round because of that. These three are all great for Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, NES, SNES, and all those older kinds of systems. So if those are the only games you want to play, you'd be perfectly fine with any of these three. But if you want the added benefit of N64, DS, PSP, stuff like that, you're gonna want to go with the Trimui Brick or the Emulation RG35XX Plus. So this category goes to those two. It's another tie. Moving on to our last category, the price. There's not much opinionated talking I can do here because this is such an objective category. I can't argue about one device being cheaper if one is objectively cheaper. And just a heads up before we get into this, the price that I'm showing is the price that these devices have on their official website or AliExpress page. And if the price changes between now and then, that's gonna mess up my category. So I'll leave a comment or something in the description if they do change it. So in order from least to most expensive, in first place, we have the Miyoo Mini Plus, $45 on their AliExpress page. Oh, I'm sorry, $45.65. This is on sale, so if it does go back to that $66 price, like I said, I will leave something in the description. I will leave something in the comments talking about how they messed up my category. But a lot of these companies like to do this thing where they say they're on sale just to get you interested and be like, oh, it's on sale. It's only going to last this long. You should buy it now so they can get your money. But oftentimes they just leave them on sale forever. So I don't know if it's going to change or not. The next device in the middle of the pack is the Trimui Brick, which is currently listed on AliExpress for $52, just barely beating out the RG35XX Plus. This went up too. Other websites have it listed for more with the benefits of faster shipping, but if you want the cheapest price, you're gonna find it on their AliExpress page. All right, and the last device in terms of price is the Anbernic RG35XX Plus at $53.11 on Anbernic's website for the cheapest model, which comes with no games, no SD card. This device is also listed at a discount, so like I said earlier, if it goes back between now and like the time I upload this, I'll leave it in the comments, I'll leave it in a video post right now, I'll leave it in the description, stuff like that. But I don't expect it to. So yeah, there's not much more to talk about here because the clear winner is the Miyoo Mini Plus because it's the cheapest. Not much more to it. Now let's talk about who won overall. Tallying up the points each of these devices got in each of these rounds, the winner is, drumroll please, the Miyoo Mini Plus. This should be a surprise to no one if you've been watching this far. If you did skip to this chapter, please go back and give me some watch time. Please, I'm begging. But anyways, yes, the Miyoo Mini Plus is the clear winner. It having my favorite design of the three, being one of my favorite operating systems, stock, and being the cheapest overall, put it over the edge. Going into this video, I had no idea who would win. I did not think the RG35XX would win, but I honestly thought it would be a closer contest between the Trimui brick and the Miyoo Mini Plus. But the Trimui brick has the least wins out of all of these, which is really funny. This isn't to say any of these devices are bad. You'd be fine going with any of these, I think. But in this competition where I'm comparing the three, the Miyoo Mini Plus just came out on top. But you'd be fine with the Trimui brick, you'd be fine with the RG35XX Plus. And so that's where I'm leaving this video. What do you guys think? Do you own all of these devices and disagree with my winner? Do you own one of these devices and disagree with my winner? Do you disagree with my winner in general? Do you agree with my winner? Are you now convinced to go out and buy one of these? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys next week. Goodbye.